Sahano bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya madhyamam Asmadacharya paryantam Vande Guru paramparam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha. Annamayadannamayaṃ athava chaitanyameva chaitanyāt dvijavaraduri kartum vanchasi kim bruhi gaccha gaccheti kim gangambuni bimbitembaramano Chandalavati payaha pure chantaramasti kanchana ghati mritkumbhayorvambare pratyak vastuni nistaranga sahaja anandavabodham budhau viproyam shvapachoyamit mahan koyam vibheda brahmaha. So yesterday we saw the prelude, the context which led to Bhagavan's composing this 5 verses, Maneesha Panchakam. So when Bhagavan, after bath in the Ganga in Kashi, when he saw on the way a Chandala, an outcast, Bhagavan said, Gacha Gacha, move aside. So this Chandala was none other than Lord Shiva himself, along with Gauri. So then this question asked by the Chandala is, should Annamaya move away from Annamaya? Means should this physical body move, or should the consciousness in this body move aside? Which should move? If you say physical body moves, now that is not given, that you have to supply. If you say physical body has to move aside, what is the difference between this physical body and that physical body? Both are nothing but matter. Now if you say consciousness has to move aside from this consciousness, in that case, where are two consciousnesses? There is only one consciousness. Who should move away from whom? When there is only one, where is the question of moving away? So what are the examples used? The sun is only one, reflections can be many. The space is only one, the conditionings can be many. The water is only one, waves can be many. In the same way, consciousness is only one, the reflected consciousnesses can be many. Now you don't give reality to the what is reflected, you give reality only to the original. So if you say Chaitanya should move, that also is illogical. So when Bhagavan listened to these words of this outcast, of this untouchable, what he called a shock wave passed through his body, as though immediately reminding him of his higher nature. His mind soars into the realms of the higher, and thus these compositions came extempore. So what is the essence of this composition? Whoever is the knower of the reality, he is my Guru. such a knower of the reality, whichever caste, creed, nationality, etc. may he belong to, it doesn't matter. Whichever ashrama he may belong to, it doesn't matter. What matters is his knowledge. And anyone who has the self-knowledge has to be considered the highest, the worshipful. So now we will enter into the text. So the first verse, this is the first verse. Let us chant this verse. Jagrat swapna sushuptishu sfutatara ya samvidujrambhate ya brahmadi pipilikantatanushu prota jagat sakshini saivaham na cha drishyavastviti dridha prajñāpi yasyasti chet chandalostu satudvijostu guruhu ityesha manisha mama. Yes. So what is the essence of this verse? The essence of this verse is the one who knows himself to be the pure consciousness. One who knows himself to be the pure consciousness, let him be a Chandala, let him be a Dvija. Such a person is my Guru. He is the most worshipful. Now, all the great commentators have classified these verses based on the Mahavkyas. So they say this verse explains the Mahavkya Prajnãnam Brahma, which comes in the Rig Veda, in the Aitareya Upanishad. So this verse is considered to be the explanation of that. Prajnãnam Brahma. Prajnānam means consciousness. This consciousness is Brahman. Prajnānam means consciousness. This is a Mahavkya from the Rig Veda. So now let us see the literal meaning of this verse and then we'll go into detail. So what is said here? Ya samvit ujrambate. Ujrambate means present very clearly. Ujrambate, it is available for experience, which is making itself evident. Ya samvit. Samvit here means consciousness. That consciousness which is clearly evident. Sfutatara means clearly. Sfutatara ujrambate. That consciousness which is clearly evident. When is it evident? Jagrat, Swapna, Sushuptishu. This consciousness is clearly evident in our three states. What are the three states? Jagrat, waking state. Swapna, dream state. Sushupti, deep sleep state. So that consciousness which is clearly evident in these three states. Ya Brahma Adi Pipilika Anta Tanushu Prota Jagat Sakshini. What is this consciousness? It is this consciousness which is present from Brahma. Brahma Adi, beginning from Brahma. Pipilika Anta. Pipilika means ant. Beginning from Brahma till the end. From the highest to the lowest of all creation. That consciousness which is Prota. Prota means is present as the very life principle. That consciousness which has gone in and through. Beginning from Brahmaji till an ant. That consciousness which has gone in and through all of them. Now how is this consciousness remaining in all of them? Jagat Sakshini. As the very witness of Jagat, of the entire world. That consciousness. Sa eva aham. That consciousness alone is me. Nacha drishya vastu. Not something which is drishya, seen. Iti. Thus, dridha prajna. The one who has dridha prajna. Dridha prajna means firm conviction. The one who has firm conviction born out of experience. One who is firmly rooted in this knowledge. Yasya asti chet. The one who has it. Saha, may he be chandalaha astu. May he be a chandala. Dvijaha astu. May he be a dvija, a brahmana. Guruhu iti esha. Mama guruhu iti esha mama manisha. Such a person is my teacher, my guru. This is my firm conviction. So that consciousness, which is clearly evident in waking, dream and deep sleep, that consciousness which has gone in and through all living beings, starting from Brahmaji till an ant, that consciousness which is the very witness in the whole world, that consciousness alone I am, not anything other than this, any drishya vastu, a seen thing. The one who has this firm conviction, the one who is rooted in this knowledge, such a person, may he be a chandala, may he be a dvija, he is my guru. This is my firm conviction. This is the literal meaning. Now let us see term by term. So here the term used for consciousness is samvit. Samvit is the term used. Vit means what? To know. Now here one sam prefix is added to it. So there is some speciality about knowing. Sam means samyak, very well. Now what do you mean very well knowing? Now this is a name of consciousness. The pure consciousness is named as samvit. This is the beauty of Sanskrit. A lot of things are implied in the name itself about the object which is described. So something special is there about consciousness. Now what is the nature of consciousness? Consciousness, its very nature is knowing. Vit means to know. What is its nature? Its nature is to know. Now this knowing has some unique feature. It is absolute knowing. It is defectless knowing. It is effortless knowing. All these meanings are hidden in some. Some plus with. What do you mean by defectless knowing? Let us take that first. What are the other knowing instruments we have? We have the sense organs who are capable of knowing, isn't it? The eyes are able to know. What are they able to know? Color and form. So you get a knowledge. And what is the means of knowledge? What is the instrument of knowledge? Eyes. So the eyes are capable of knowing. It is capable of knowing color and form. In the same way, ears are capable of knowing. It gives you some knowledge about the world. What knowledge? Knowledge about the sound. So they are all instrument of knowledge. They are all capable of knowing. But the problem with their knowing is, it is all defectful knowing. For example, the eyes have got their own defects. What is the defect? You can't see which is very, very far. You can't see which is very, very small. Now they are all the defects. Knowing is happening, but it is a defectful knowing. It is giving an information, no doubt, but that information is not complete. It is not perfect. The knowledge is limited by the very limitation of the instrument. Are you able to follow? This is called defect. It is not defect free. You get a knowledge, but it is filled with defects. Right? Sometimes, if the person is suffering from color blindness, then again it is added defect. So not only the instrument has got limitation, it has got inherent defects also. Or suppose the person is suffering from jaundice. They say the person suffering from jaundice see everything yellow. Now, these are all the defects of the very instrument of knowledge. So sense organs are limited. Now let us come one more step inside. The sense organs are able to know, gather information. It is capable of knowing the gross material world. One step inside, now we have the mind. Is the mind capable of knowing? Yes. Mind is also an instrument to know. In fact, the eyes will not know unless it is backed by the mind. So mind is also an instrument through which you know. The subtle world of thoughts, it is known through the mind. The gross world of matter is known through the sense organs. Now what is the defect with the mind? Even this mind is filled with defect. What is the defect? Your knowledge is conditioned by your likes and dislikes. Knowledge is happening, but it is a knowledge filled with defects. Now what about consciousness? It knows, and this knowledge is absolutely defectless. Why is it defectless? The knowledge gained by consciousness is defectless because it doesn't depend on any instrument to know. The moment you use an instrument to know, the defects of the instrument will be reflected in the knowledge. To the extent the instrument is perfect, to that extent the knowledge is perfect. The unique feature about consciousness is it doesn't use any instrument to know. Why it doesn't use any instrument to know? Knowing is its nature. Therefore, no instruments are necessary. This is called as defect-free knowing. Then the second one is absolute knowing. What do you mean absolute knowing? Eyes are able to know because it is backed by the mind. Mind is able to know because it is backed by consciousness. Knowing is the nature of consciousness. Knowing is not the nature of the mind. It is only a borrowed property from consciousness. Consciousness by itself is of the nature of knowledge. This property of consciousness to know, this property has been borrowed by the mind. Mind is a subtle instrument. A subtle instrument is able to reflect well. The nature of consciousness is chit. Chit means that knowing principle. That knowing principle is reflected in the mind. So therefore it appears as though the mind is also capable of knowing. So it is a borrowed property. What is the proof? Whenever you use your mind to know, you get tired and exhausted. Some people go to sleep. For some time it's okay, but if the class goes on 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, then you get tired. Why do you get tired? Somewhere you are putting forth effort to know. The very fact that you are putting forth effort to know shows the nature of the mind is not, it is not its absolute nature. Because if it is your nature, then there should not be any tiredness. Consciousness can keep knowing for infinite period of time because there is no effort. Why there is no effort? Because it is its nature. Knowing is its nature, and therefore it can be effortless. It has to be effortless. What is the proof that something is my nature? If that is effortless in me, then know for sure that is my nature. Thoughts, is it the nature of the mind? Swamiji, I think it is the nature, because my mind is all the time chattering, effortlessly chattering. So definitely chattering is my nature. Chattering is not your nature, it is a cultivated nature. There is a difference between absolute nature and cultivated nature. What do you mean cultivated nature? You have made it a habit. At some time it was not there, you cultivated it. And now it has as though become your habit, become your nature. Are you able to follow? Today chattering has become the habit because we unconsciously in the past gave license to chattering. We cultivated chattering, and now chattering has become as though our nature. Noise has become as though our nature. So what is the proof that it is not our nature? You get tired. How long can you chatter? And that is why God, out of infinite compassion, has given something called sleep. Sleep is a compulsive order from the Lord to give rest. This order is not needed if you are abiding in your nature. Because nature means effortlessness, and wherever there is effortlessness, there is no tiredness. And if there is no tiredness, sleep is not needed. Yes or no? Sleep is needed because there is effort. And effort implies we are not abiding in our nature. What is consciousness? It is absolute knowing. It is effortless knowing. It is defectless knowing. This is our nature. Every other knowing is a borrowed knowing, is a secondary knowing. Primary knowing is from consciousness, secondary knowing is through mind, tertiary knowing is through sense organs. It is percolating down and down and down. So to the extent you go outward, to that extent that knowledge will be a defective knowledge, an imperfect knowledge, an effortful knowledge. Is it heavy? We have only discussed till now samvit. Right? We have only discussed some of with. This is samvit. So this consciousness, how is it presenting itself? Ujrambate. It's very, very clearly evident. Ujrambate means evident. Experienced. That clearly comes from the term sfutatara. Sfutatara means very clearly. Nobody can deny this consciousness. Yes, you may ignore it. That is your choice. You may disregard it. It is absolutely your choice. But you can't deny it. That is what is emphasized through these words. Sfutatara ujrambate. Now in this sfutatara also there is gradation. If the mind is dull, it is not that clear. If the mind is sattvic, then that clarity gains a sharpness of intensity. it becomes intensely present. Everybody is experiencing consciousness. Most of us experience consciousness in an adulterated form. What do you mean adulterated form? Consciousness plus body plus mind plus sense organs plus prana. This is called consciousness in an adulterated, impure form. But as this futatara, it becomes sharper and sharper, clearer and clearer. And this is where the Chitta Shuddhi is important. Why do we emphasize on Chitta Shuddhi? This futatara should become clear, very, very clear. Then slowly what happens? As you start observing yourself, you will come to know body, prana, senses, they are all far, far away. There is something else in the very core of your being. Body is an observed thing. It is out. Senses, it is out. But as the witnessing becomes sharper, and for that witnessing, the mind has to be extremely pure. It has to be very, very sattvic. In such an extremely pure mind, what do you see? You find that your essence, your core, which is pure consciousness, has nothing to do with all these layers, different layers of personality. All these different layers of personality slowly, slowly start receding from you. And what is left is only pure consciousness as your true being. The very thoughts recede from you. You become an observer of your thoughts. To the extent your mind is pure, to that extent you clearly see the difference between the witnessing consciousness and the witnessed BMI. The distinction, the difference, the distance between the witness and the witnessed, the distance is determined by purity. It is clearly seen with purity. Otherwise it's a homogeneous mixture. Sputatara ujrambhate. So in advanced sadhak, that's futatara, that becomes more and more intense. It becomes very clearly evident. To what extent? To the extent that you come to know the consciousness is the support. Everything is just a superficial ripple. The prime thing, the support, what you call that central pillar, you experience that it is consciousness. Everything is supported in it. Everything else remains supported by consciousness. Now this consciousness, you will find, what is the proof that this consciousness is the reality? What is the proof? The proof is abadhyatvam satyatvam. This consciousness can never be denied in any of the three states. What are the three states? Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. In the Jagrat also it is clearly evident. In the Swapna state also it is clearly evident. In the Sushupti also it is clearly evident for Mahatmas. The one thing which keeps lending its support for all the mental states to come and go, that substratum which lends that support is called consciousness. So in the waking state, consciousness is there or not? It is there. In consciousness, everything is happening. This is very clear to all of us. In the dream state, what is the support? Again, it is consciousness. What about deep sleep? People have doubt in deep sleep only. In deep sleep also, Knowing continues, but the only difference is it is not egoistic knowing. This is the difference. What do you mean egoistic knowing? Knowing plus BMI is called egoistic knowing. Consciousness, when identified with the BMI, that also is capable of knowing. This knowing is called egoistic knowing. So in the waking state, what kind of knowing is it? It is not pure knowing, it is egoistic knowing. Because that knowing is distorted by your identification with the BMI. In the dream state, what kind of knowing is it? It is again egoistic knowing, because in the dream you create a body for yourself. In the dream you get identified with the body and you create a dream ego. In the dream you interact with the dream world through the dream ego, not the waking ego. The waking ego is dropped. You take up a dream ego and then you experience the world. So in the dream also, what kind of knowing is it? It is egoistic knowing. The only difference is that ego is dream ego. Now you enter into deep sleep. In deep sleep what happens? Mind dissolves. When mind dissolves, thoughts dissolve. When thoughts dissolve, can the ego remain? Ego cannot remain, because ego is nothing but I thought, aham vritti. It is also a thought. Since ego is also a thought, and since in deep sleep all the thoughts vanish, so therefore the ego thought also vanishes. So therefore the ego is not available to know. Sense organs are not available to know. Mind is not available to know. Then what knows? Only consciousness knows. So the knowing continues. But we as an ego are not aware of that knowing, because we are habituated to egoistic knowing. Since egoistic knowing is not happening, we think we don't know. You don't know as the ego, but you as consciousness, you know. How do we know? After waking up, what do you say? I knew nothing. That very statement, I knew nothing, says I knew. The only thing is, there was nothing to know. I knew that absence of objects. I knew the absence of thoughts. I knew the absence of ego. But I knew. There was a constant knowing happening of the not knowing. Isn't it? Words have limitation, so I am struggling. But since it is our experience, so therefore you can relate. Only pointers are needed. The pointers can take you there, because it's our experience. So in Sushupti also, what is happening? Knowing is happening. If knowing is happening, whose property it is to know? It is a property of consciousness. So if knowing is happening, definitely consciousness is present. Yes or no? So therefore, consciousness is present in the waking state, it is present in the dream state, it is present in the deep sleep state. Therefore, it is something which is not negated by the change of states. And since it is not negated by the change of states, therefore we can say this is the reality. Because what is the definition of reality? Reality is that which is never negated at any period of time. It is never negated by any state of mind. Therefore, this is the conclusion. What is the conclusion? Consciousness is the reality. Just like we say, the screen is the reality, not the movie. How do you know? Before the movie also screen was there. During the movie also screen is there. After the movie also? Yes. So the screen is the very support. Actually, what are you looking at? You are looking at screen only. Actually, what is only present? Only screen is present. In the olden days, they used to have theaters made of, coconut leaves and all. Olden days, especially in South India. Coconut leaves. They have the theater, movie theater. So sometimes what happens, there is one small hole. And the hole, that sunlight comes, and there is that hole. We have a beam of light falling on the screen. So that patch remains bright. Throughout the movie you see that patch there. Isn't it? Reminding you again and again that the whole thing is a illusion. The only that one point, that alone shows you the reality. Isn't it? If only we had such a hole to have a peep into this consciousness, it would have been so nice. But unfortunately, God's creation is perfect. There is no scope for any hole to peep in. If at all there is a hole, that is the Shastra, which takes us through convincing logic from the known to the unknown. It is only the teachings of the Shastra, the teachings of the teachers, which acts as that beam of light, reminding us of the reality. So, Jagrat Swapna Sushupti Susfutatara Ya Samvid Ujrumbate. Only one line is over now. Then, the very same consciousness. So, as far as an individual is concerned, I know consciousness is the very substratum in me. Once this is known, the next is only a logical extension. What is a logical extension? If this is true with me, this should be true with everyone else. If you have known yourself, you have known everyone else. First try to know yourself, then you have known everything and everyone. So that is the second line. Now this experience of mine, which is subjective experience, this I now generalize. So what is the generalized statement? Ya Brahmadi Pipilika Anta Tanushu. In all the Tanushu, in all the bodies, starting from the highest, the noblest Jiva, none other than Brahmaji, the one who has created the world. Brahmaji is considered to be the noblest of all jivas. He has done so much of punya that the Supreme Lord made him the creator of the world. In the Upanishad, this Brahma is called as Hiranyagarbha. So from Brahmaji till the lowest, the most insignificant of creation, what is that? An ant. You may take a microorganism, whatever. Pipilika, the ant. Tanushu, they all have a body. They are all jivas like me. So the very same consciousness which is there in me is there in all of them. Prota. In and through all of them, it is this consciousness which is a common factor binding them together. Mai sarvamidam protam sutre maniganaiva. The same protam is here as prota. Woven, strung. So you have a string and you put beads and then you make a beautiful garland, isn't it? So the role of consciousness is the role of that string in the garland. So what does that string do? It keeps everything together. The string is not visible, but without the string, garland has no existence. In the same way, consciousness is not visible, but without consciousness acting as the substratum, the world has no existence. thing which is unseen, but which is the very substratum. Just like the string in the garland. Everything, every flower, every bead remains in the garland because there is the string which is supporting it. The existence of a bead in the garland is because of the existence of the string. In the same way, each and every being is existing because of the existence of consciousness. Consciousness is giving that existence to everyone. And how is this consciousness in us? Jagat Sakshini, as a Sakshi. Witness. The ultimate witness. Whenever we say witness, understand it is a knowing principle. It knows. It directly knows. It knows without distortion. It knows absolutely. It knows unconditionally. It knows without bias. It knows everything. Jagat Sakshi. And because it knows, that supreme consciousness, taking the role of Ishvara, takes up the role of Karma Phala Data. How is that Brahman able to become Karma Phala Data? He has seen who has done what karma. Isn't it? How did he see? Seeing is his nature. He helplessly sees. He effortlessly sees. He sees everything. It is a perfect CCTV. Batteryless CCTV. With infinite memory. Which is focused everywhere. Such a perfect CCTV is. Now, can you cheat him? You can't. So therefore that Bhagavan, who is the Jagat Sakshi, becomes Karma Phaladata for every Jiva. That's the glory of this consciousness. Saeva Aham. Why did we discuss all this? This consciousness, this knowing principle is me. Saeva aham nacha drishya vastu. Not anything which is seen. This ultimate seer, this ultimate witness, I am. Not something which is seen. Iti dridha prajna. Not just prajna, dridha prajna. Firm conviction. When will your conviction becomes firm? Conviction becomes firm with experience. Otherwise, there is every possibility that you may doubt your conviction. When do you get doubtless conviction? When you have experienced it directly, conviction becomes doubtless, firm. It is the experience which is the proof of knowledge. I know. What is the proof? I have experienced it, therefore I know. So what is the proof of knowledge? Not intellectual information gathering. This can be done by reading books. That is not the proof of knowledge. Proof of knowledge is in experience. Just as we say, proof of pudding is in eating. Whether that pudding is there or not, what is the proof? You should enjoy it, isn't it? So proof of knowledge is an experience. So this dridha prajna means this Mahatma is not talking by reading some books. He is not giving some, secondary knowledge. It is his direct experience. Therefore that experience has made the prajna dridha. Knowledge is of three types. When you gather it from the books, it is called information. It is also knowledge. informative knowledge. When you reflect upon it, when there are no more doubts, then it is called convinced knowledge. You are convinced. But with nididhyasanam, when it becomes experience, then it becomes experienced knowledge. Informative knowledge, convinced knowledge, and then experienced knowledge. So when we say dridha prajna, it is not some informative knowledge, it is experienced knowledge. So what is the experience? I am consciousness. Nacha drishya vastu, not something which is seen. Such a person who has this knowledge, such a person who has directly experienced it, Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, whoever he may be, I am not bothered about the external descriptions of the person. I am not bothered which caste he belongs, whether it is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, I am not bothered about it. I don't care which ashrama he belongs, whether he is a brahmachari ashrama or a grihastha ashrama, vanaprasthi, sannyasa. No. If a person has got this knowledge, he is to be worshipped. And such a person is my Guru. So this is the first verse. So the entire description is about consciousness. So that is why we say it is a description of Prajnãnam Brahma. Mahavkya. So Prajnãnam is similar to Samvid. The role which Sam plays in Samvid is the very same role which Pra plays in Prajnãnam. Prajnãnam, not ordinary Jnanam, Prakarshena. So that Pra has got all the meanings. What kind of knowing, what kind of knowledge is it? Defect-free knowledge, instrument-free knowledge, absolute knowledge, independent knowledge, effortless knowledge, which is the nature of consciousness. This consciousness is us, is the Brahman, is the truth. So this is the essence of the first verse. The second verse we will see tomorrow. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.